See, if you ever been listening to a drum and bass song and heard those basses that go, "Arr-rr-rr," and you ever go, I want to make one of those. Congratulations, you're in the right place today. We're going to do Reese basses. I'm going to do this in Serum, but there's going to be a lot of post-processing involved in this. It's kind of crazy how much of how Reese basses kind of sound is down to how it is in post-processing. A lot of the rest of Reese basses are super simple. So there's a couple of different ways you can go about it. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get two saw waves that are moving really close to each other. They're not quite the same pitch, so there will be times where they move into each other and phase cancel, and then they move out. So you hear the up and down motion because it's going in the phase canceling and the not phase canceling. For instance, when you turn up unison on a saw wave, the two instances of unison are slightly different in pitch, so that's how those two start reesing. You can hear it slightly, but it's a lot more obvious on the lower pitches. You'll hear a little bit goes, oh. The thing about doing this with unison though is that it doesn't exactly phase cancel. It phase cancels in some spots. It's really down to the not only the random seed you get, but it's also kind of like the panning doesn't really help it Reese as much. So you can take two instances of two saw waves and make them a little bit different in fine tuning. And you're already starting to get that Reese motion. So let's take two instances of two saw waves. Now let's turn the fine tuning all the way up on that one and all the way down on that one. Goes a lot faster. So a lot of the times you'll hear with like Reese basses especially, when they get higher in pitch, they go faster. And that's a little bit due to the fact that the higher in pitch, the faster the movement is. The actual waves are moving a lot faster, so they do the Reesing motion a lot faster. But something you can do to exaggerate that is in Serum, there's this little note thing. Where this green dot lands going to match up with where you are on the keyboard. Let's say I'm down here on the D sharp. It's going to be a little bit lower. You can click and drag this and put this on your fine tuning. You put that one up, and then you can make this one all the way down. And you can make it really exaggerated by turning this curve into a different shape. So that's one simple way to go about the... Now, how I do Reese basses is actually using the motion for the bass and a little bit something different on top. So I'll put a filter on the actual saw waves, and you can introduce things like noise to be your top end. And to like compress it all together. It doesn't entirely get you there, so a lot of people, like myself, will just turn up the distortion really high. And that's how you get some really good starting points. A lot of the times, when you're doing the distortion super high, you're going to want to actually cut out this around 200 range a little bit more, because that's where things get a little muddy. You can add a third tone in there using another oscillator. You can also add a little bit of the motion using, of course, the porta. That way it slides up to higher notes. A lot of the times I'll find it helpful to just turn off the random starting position, so all of the waveforms start at the same place and you get the exact same motion every time. You can turn this phase to be in a different spot to give it a little bit of a different tone as well. Another thing I like to do is turn this Combs filter on with the cutoff all the way up. It just has a specific tone that I really like. Whenever I want to add a little bit of extra width, instead of turning up the unison, I'll turn on this chorus. Because again, with unison, you have a lot less control over the movement of the Reese bass, whereas doing it this way, you have a little bit more control. Chorus would make for a better option when widening, or dimension would also be a good way to do it. Different white noise will have different sounds. And having this distortion be super loud is really helpful, and a lot of the distortions don't work. Like the soft clipper, it has a really cool movement to it. It definitely doesn't have quite as much crunch. You can always mess around. You don't have to do the drive all the way up here. Then we can come to post-processing. I have a patcher preset that I put on basically all of my Reese basses. I just turn the saturation knob all the way up and the input down a little. And it does a lot of the work for me. And you can always go back to and add different effects in. I know something that a lot of people like to do is add width on a macro. So you can add like some mix to this. and you can have the width come in only on the higher parts. You guys can get this Super Saturator probably on my Patreon. More information on that at the end of the video. But without that, I think a good place to start would be Trash 2 by iZotope. If you don't have Trash 2, I'll go over some more FL Studio native options here in just a second, but I really love this one for my Reese basses. I like harmonic control, and of course you'll have to go in and EQ out some more of this 200 range, and even probably control some of the highs a little bit. Things like reverb can add a little bit of different tone as well. It's very cool. It sounds like I'm about ready to go to war. This is probably one of the better ones if you don't have Trash 2, is you can use Fruity Wave Shaper is pretty cool. Clipping, of course, Fruity Soft Clipper. And that'll help it not take over your entire mix, because these Reese basses are full. They're fat. They will take up your entire mix if you're not careful. Have fun with your Reese basses. Stop making regular ass Reese basses. I'm tired of regular ass Reese basses. Now, for the portion of this video where I tell you about my Patreon. So did you see my fancy thing earlier? I magically had 2 knobs that could make my Reese basses go from this to this. Well, join my Patreon. I give out these kinds of things and how to use them. I'm going to be putting out a big announcement video here soon. And it'll have a tutorial on how to use Patcher, how to troubleshoot Patcher presets for when these ones won't work, because I use a lot of funny plugins. And it'll have the same thing for Ableton, where I go over Ableton racks and how to make Ableton racks and how to troubleshoot my Ableton racks. Thank you for watching this video. Make something cool, or